So I was scared of doing stand-up for a very long time, and I finally ponied up and did it two and some change years ago, and it's been one of the best decisions of my life. It's what I've always wanted to do ever since I was a kid.
Hi, Parker. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, Mark. I appreciate you making the time.
Absolutely. Welcome to Peak Performance Perspectives, where we help entrepreneurs master health, wealth, and relationships. I have to start out by asking, what does peak performance mean to you?
Peak performance. Peak performance to me means that you are in every area of your life, you are excelling. So, peak performance to me means you're not only thriving in terms of maybe your money or your business, but also in terms of your health and your relationships and maybe your passions as well. I don't know. You have to, I don't know. Life can be about one thing at a time in regards to maybe for a while you're working on one part of your life or you're working on another part. For me, recently, it's been getting back into the gym over the last couple months. So I've been building the health side of my life. I'm probably in the best shape I've been in my entire life. So I feel pretty good about that. But you also, in addition to that, once you get that maybe an automated system for that, or I know it doesn't matter necessarily what workout I'm going to be doing. I just know I have my sheet. I'm just going to go to the gym. I'm going to do this. So I automate that to a certain extent. And then I can also start to focus on other areas of my life, like dating or relationships with my family. And then from there, also focus on the business as well. So peak performance to me means in every area of life, you're excelling. I am an artist. So of course, I'm going to add the artistic part in there about pursuing your passions as well. And when I'm my best self, when I'm at, I suppose you could say peak performance when I'm an artist, it's when every day, that old Stephen Pressfield War of Art, you got to go back and write every day, go back and work on your art every day. When I'm my best self and at my peak performance in regards to my art, what I will be doing is I'll be working on that at least a little bit every.
There are cynics that they will look at us, you and me, those like us, and call us dreamers. And they'll
Hmm.
say, that's not how real world is. In real world, you cannot excel in all these areas. Real world is just about surviving to the minutia and maybe
Hmm.
being good at one thing, if you are lucky. What would you say to those people?
Sounds like a really boring movie.
What do you mean by
Well, I just mean that sounds like a very boring. I wouldn't want to watch that movie. Just grinding. I shouldn't say grinding. Grinding is indicative of hustling, of working hard, of grinding it out, so to speak. But in terms of life just being, you just got to get through it. Yeah, there's a lot of struggle and I suppose a lot of boring work that needs to be done in the minutia in the meantime. But I don't know. I find a lot of joy to be found from pursuing my passions and excelling in different areas. And I'm a shorter guy. I joke that I'm like 5'7" on a good day, which is probably not accurate. It's what my driver's license says, but the DMV doesn't need to know that. The point is, as a shorter guy, I never would have assumed that I would enjoy seeing how much muscle mass I can add to my body because that's not for me. I'm a smaller guy. I'm slighter of frame. I'm more skinny. But when I excel at the gym and I continue to improve and I can continue to add weights to my bench press and stuff, that feels really good. And it also feels really good when I try out a new joke on stage when I'm doing stand up and it works and I find something wholly unique and interesting. That feels really good too. So yeah, I think that yeah, you can only really be good at one thing. Maybe, but I don't know. Even then, if you're really only good at one thing, if you work really hard at that thing and you're the most excellent person in the field and across the entire world at that one thing, I think that's also quite admirable. So I don't know. For me, life is about making things more interesting, more colorful, and I don't know. I'm always a fan of good stories. I don't know. I don't know. I would like if I'm going to be in a movie and that movie is my life and I'm the main character, I want that movie to be exciting.
you are a stand up comedian?
Yes,
And
sir.
you are also an executive coach. Originally drew you to stand-up comedy, and how did that eventually evolve into forming Cuff Consulting?
So off the cuff consulting, it's flipped, believe it or not. So I started coaching before I did stand up. So I've been teaching now. I started my business off the cuff consulting back in 2020. And so I've been doing that at the recording of this podcast for about 4 years. I've been doing stand up for a little over two and a half. About, am I two and a half? Close to two and a half. I've been doing stand up since July of 2022. So about a little over 2 years, 2.5 years. However, where a lot of what I teach comes from is improv and stage theater. I have a large background doing that. Ever since I was 8 years old, I pretty much have been on stage in one form or another, whether that's choir, whether that is live theater with stage plays and musicals, whether that was show choir when I was in high school. I studied theater in college as well. It's what I have one of my degrees in is stage theater or theater arts, I think is what the paper says. And then also, I live out here in Los Angeles now. I've studied at the Groundling School, which a lot of people School. If you Google the Groundling School, you'll see a lot of the alums who've gone on to Saturday Night Live and such from there. I was there for a very brief period, but yeah, I've been doing a lot of performance in general throughout my life. And so as a result of that's where the curriculum for off the cuff consulting comes from. And as a brief summary to our listeners here, what I do is I basically teach communication through the lens of theater and performance, ideally taking exercises and games really that I learned growing up and being in the theater and using it as a way to teach effective communication, particularly for business professionals. So I've stepped out of the arts world and put one foot in the business world as well. I've really developed a passion for teaching. What drew me to stand up, it's been a very long road to get there, but I always really wanted to do stand up. In doing all of these other artistic paths and passions and stuff, I really was just trying to do stand up without doing stand up. Looking back, I always loved making people laugh. I loved it, but I was always really afraid of doing stand up specifically. So as a way to do it without doing it, I did a lot of musicals. I did stage plays. I wrote comedy sketches. I did projects for homework in school and would make them funny and stuff like that. So I was scared of doing stand up for a very long time, and I finally ponied up and did it two and some change years ago, and it's been one of the best decisions of my life. It's what I've always wanted to do ever since I was a kid. So I'm just very grateful and very happy to be able to do it. And it has definitely developed my coaching practice because now I can take a lot of the lessons from stand-up comedy as well and blend it in to teach effective communication as far as my coaching goes.
Looking back at it, why were you so afraid of doing stand up?
People ask me like, why do you do stand up? And the best answer I honestly, and I've thought a lot about this. The best answer I can come to is I felt called to do it. That's it. I have no other salute. Like I could give a lot of, well, I watched a lot of Jerry Seinfeld. My parents loved Jerry Seinfeld. And so Seinfeld was always on when I was a kid. And so I caught little glimpses of that, or I watched Robin Williams movies here. I could give a lot of past or history examples to justify. But if I'm being honest, I'm speaking from the heart. I kind of just felt called to do it. And so I think if I'm looking back and I'm honest, I think what it was is I knew that pretty early on and it scared me, probably. So in fear, I was like, I'm good. I'm good. Like I had the opportunity. I remember one time when I was in high school, they did a talent show and I was going to go do some stand up. I was going to go do some stand up. And then once it got close to the talent show, I ejected. I was saying, I'm good. I'm all right. You guys go ahead. I'm all right. It just scared me. It scared me because I don't know if anybody who's listening ever feels like they have a passion that they know that, yeah, this is probably what I'm supposed to be doing. It would make sense if I did this. I don't know if anyone listening who has that, but my only regret is I didn't do this sooner. This is my passion. It's my opinion, what I feel called to do.
I can guarantee you this is a podcast for entrepreneurs. Every single person listening to this has felt that at some point
Yeah.
because we build it up too much in our heads. And sometimes it's so scary to take that action because then it stops becoming a dream and it becomes a reality. And in the dream world, we can dream up anything we want. And in reality, there are failures and there are obstacles. What if whatever I dreamed of would never come to true? Sometimes you
Yeah.
would like to hold on to the nice, comforting dream instead of being shoved it in the cold of reality.
Yeah, because then you have to take responsibility, don't you?
There you go. There you go.
You have to,
So
yeah, it has to be real.
yeah, I'm so curious, right? Because improv is associated with spontaneity and creativity. How do you take these qualities and then make them accessible to professionals who are more analytical and data driven?
It's a great question. A lot of my students that I work with tend to be analytical men. So, men who are generally in fields having to do with engineering, a lot of people who are managing other people or running businesses, but guys who are, as you said, data driven. It's a scary process, I think, for an analytical person to be able to take that leap into spontaneity and creativity, mostly because they don't trust it. You're using a different part of your brain, in my experience. It's the analogy I always use is it's the difference between understanding a game of a strategy game such as chess and then doing a bench press. You're using your brain, your logical mind, your analytical mind for that, and you're using kinesthetic intelligence for the other thing. It's just like shooting a basketball. It's just two very different things. And how you take it, there are exercises basically that I run with these professionals, with these business professionals. And ideally, what it does is it teaches them that not only is it okay to not know quite what to say next and experience, call it the emotional turmoil that can come from not knowing what to say exactly next. And then also to develop the muscles to have some sort of spontaneous creative problem solving that they can do. Because what you find in most jobs is even if you're working in a very analytical field like an engineer, there are small problems that come up all the time. I think that's anybody's job, really. Small problems are going to come up all the time. And so it's up to you to be able to solve those problems quickly. And for analytical people, if they do not have a script, if they don't have an algorithm, if they don't have an SOP, standard operating procedure, they feel like the world might be crashing down. What I do is, like I said, two things: teach how to handle the tension, the stress that comes from all of a sudden being in this ambiguous area where you don't quite know what's going to happen next. And then on the other side of that, actually having the skill set to create a solution in that moment. So it's both of those: the emotional resilience, I guess you could say, of handling that turmoil, and then also having the ability to, and how I teach it, have the witty thing to say or to have the humorous thing to say. And those skills translate.
Where in life, in their journey, in terms of confidence and skill set, are most business professionals when they seek out your help?
Can you ask that one more time? I think I know what I want to say, but I want to make sure I specifically answer your question.
Where in their specific life journey are these business professionals when they're seeking out their for your help?
I find that a lot of the people I work with are, they love self-improvement anyway. So it's two things really. The first group, I guess you could say, when people seek me out and want to work with me, they are interested in improving every aspect of their life. Going back to what we mentioned with peak performance, people who are just interested in getting every area of their life on lock. If they're young, or maybe I've worked with a couple older guys who they might be towards the end of their careers, but they decided, you know what, screw it. I'm going to get good at everything, even if I'm about to retire. So it's people who are really focused on just learning as much as they can and improving as much as they can. And improv is a really interesting, novel, fun, and for that matter, useful skill set to add into that toolbox, so to speak. So that's one group that I work with. But on the whole, I find it's people who are maybe in their, maybe a decade into their career or so. Maybe they've been working at their particular field. Maybe they've been with a particular company for a little while, and they're starting to realize that their, I don't know if hardware is the right word, maybe software, whatever they're doing is not getting them what they want. And they're frustrated by this. They're frustrated by the fact that someone who is less talented than them is getting a promotion. They're frustrated by the fact that in their dating life, they see all of their friends and family getting coupled up and stuff, but all of a sudden, I feel awkward when it comes to dating. They are frustrated by the success that they might see other people have, and they have some sort of hint in their mind that it probably means their communication and relationships need work. And they don't quite know what that means, but they are sure, they're like, okay, he interviewed better than I did, and that's probably why he got that position over me, even though I'm much more qualified and I'm much better at the job. I would be so great, but all right. And it takes a lot for a person in that position, particularly a professional who's been in their field for quite some time, who's very good at what they do, to have a little bit of humility and say, okay, I do need a little bit of work in this regard. And that's, I'm always floored by the willingness a lot of my students have to go through the ringer and learn what I teach, because it can be difficult. It's new muscles that a lot of them haven't used. But to answer your question, where are they at? A lot of them are frustrated that they haven't really gotten what they want yet, and they have a sense that working on their mouthpiece and their communication would be tremendously beneficial in that regard to get them further along in their careers or in their personal lives.
So when these business professionals, they're feeling frustrated, they're feeling bottled up, are they coming to you simply for practical learnings that could help them overcome that obstacle at work? Or is it also a form of an artistic outlet for them to feel differently about themselves?
It's both. In that the first group that I described, the ones who are very interested in improving every aspect of their life, there's a little bit of artistic sensibility there. They're the same people who are going to go take salsa dancing lessons or learn how to surf or really just run a marathon, do a Spartan race, stuff like that. Those guys, yeah, absolutely. They want to be Renaissance men. They want to have the full scope of the human experience. And I align with that philosophy a lot myself personally. So I love that. I love that. But when it comes to working with the other group of people that I usually work with in regards to just being maybe frustrated or bottled up, that they're not getting what they want out of their life, what they find is they're working with me absolutely practically. And so is the first group. The first group has a lot of practical applications, but as I mentioned, it's more the Renaissance man. I'm going to learn everything. But the group, in terms of the professionals who they want to go farther in their careers or in their dating lives, personal life, stuff like that, and they just sense they don't have the skills, so they want to work with a professional who can teach them. What happens is, funny enough, it is incredibly practical. And even within the first week of running the solo exercises that I assign and stuff like that, they see a marked improvement in their communication skills. So practically 100% great. But what eventually happens is a lot of them are interested then, because I start to show them some homeworks that I assign, for example, I'll have them watch improv comedy, like literal improv comedy. I'll have them watch videos and we'll do breakdowns to see what has happened in this particular situation. And so that what we find is not only do they start to grow a love for maybe the artistic part of it, but also it absolutely builds confidence in that emotional component as well. So the short answer to all of this is it's incredibly practical what I teach, and I pride myself on making this very artistic, comedic, humorous thing very practical and easy to learn and utilize in your professional and personal life. But also, yeah, it's a lot of fun and you definitely gain a lot of confidence doing it. So emotionally, it's great too.
If my listeners at this point are hearing you and they're thinking, wow, I could use these skills to become a better entrepreneur, to become a better marketing person, a salesperson, was to actually talk to people. But improv, that just sounds so scary. What are some common misconceptions business professionals have about improv? And how do you go about dispelling them in your workshop?
I'm an alpha male and improv is effeminate. Why would I do that? Is a big one. It's a
Mm-hmm.
big one. And to be fair, yeah, the theater does have that reputation, but there's a lot of people who are just afraid of public speaking. And so in the vacuum that like me, I ran away from stand up for a very long time. And in the vacuum of I'm not going to do that, there's a lot of excuses that come up as a result of that. What I teach is in regards to the theater, I actually teach what is a very different form of improv than I would say a school like Groundlings and Second City does. Now, I always recommend if people really want to take a deep dive in improv and they love what I teach, to go work with an accredited, I don't know what accreditation a lot of these improv schools have, but I know that they're incredibly legitimate, like Second City and the Groundlings, especially. Those are the ones I know predominantly being out here in Los Angeles. I think Upright Citizens Brigade is pretty good too, from what I've heard. But having said that, the difference between me and these schools is I put a lot of focus on exercises, like a gym regimen of exercises, meaning every day, me not being there, you as my student are going to do 2 solo exercises and you're going to run those 2 rounds of 2 minutes, that sort of thing. So it's much more, like I said, a gym or an exercise regimen, as opposed to if you were to show up to an improv school, they would have you work on scenes and characters and more acting based things. I'm more focused on the games and the exercises in regards to the practicality of communications, particularly, like I said, for business professionals. So if someone's a little bit, I don't know, I'm not an actor, I'm not an artistic person, I'm the perfect person to work with for that, because we don't really talk. I have sales guys, especially, who actually do want to go into the acting side of things, where they want to go over monologues and they want to work on their tonality and stuff. And I find acting work or monologue work to be very beneficial in that regard. But that's about as far as I go into the acting side of things. I'm much more focused on helping business professionals get rid of the ums and uhs from their language, of not having to panic when they don't know what to say next, how to be a better storyteller, how to communicate in a way, like I say, that you have a movie that's in your head. And by the time you finish communicating, whoever you're speaking to has the same exact movie playing in their head. So I'm much more focused on the practical aspects of communication. So in terms of someone, oh, improv is just for actors, if that might be a common misconception, it could be to a certain extent. I think the person could, just by stepping a foot into one world, doesn't necessarily mean you have to be perfect at that world. Having said that, I do think the way I teach it is very practical. So I got the alpha. I'm a big, strong man. I don't need to learn improv. That's one. Improv's only for actors might be another misconception that I addressed. It's another misconception. It's that, what would be the right way to put this? Improv is something that is only based upon spontaneity, I think would be another misconception. What you find, funny enough, even if you study at a big improv school, you start to get a sense of pattern. So, yes, it's going to be very spontaneous. Yes, I don't quite know what my scene partner might say next, but I do know that if I'm in an acting scene with someone, we definitely need to very quickly establish the relationship between these two characters. We need to establish what we're doing. We need to establish where we are. And in every improv acting scene, quote unquote, that you would do, you are going to establish these three things for sure. I think to have any successful improv scene, you need to have that within the first couple of lines, the first couple of seconds, you should establish that. So, in an interesting way, there is a formula, there is a pattern that even though most of it is based around spontaneity. And the way I teach it, practically moving away from the idea of acting scenes, yeah, well, I teach the ideas of saying yes. And that's something that you can always count on, regardless of the spontaneity that might come up or you don't know how to handle things. At least I give you a really good tool to be able to handle that, which is saying yes and, or as I define it for practical all intents and purposes, accept and engage, which I think does a really good job underlying what yes and means in your life when it comes to making decisions. You accept the circumstances that you've been given. You don't fight them. You don't judge them. You're not mad at them. You don't waste emotional energy on what is or what has happened. It just is, and we got to deal with things as they are. We accept what's going on, yes, and I choose to engage with it and add value, ideally. So even though you might not know what's coming next, you can always count on that rule. That rule will lead you to a lot of really great places. So common misconceptions. I don't need to learn this. It's effeminate. Why would I do that? As one, the other one being improv is only for actors, and the other one being that it's all spontaneous and it's chaotic, and I don't know. I can't do that. There's actually a formula in place that is really easy to learn and utilize.
Where does emotional and social intelligence fall into all of this? How does improv foster those skills, especially for those who are not naturally good at talking, might be introverted?
Listening is a big one. Listening's a big one. In improv as an art, particularly as it was founded back in I want to say it was the 1960s, 50s, at least 60s in Chicago with the Second City. Second City was one of the original improv schools. They put a big emphasis immediately, and it's permeated throughout all the improv schools and my own teaching on the ensemble. The idea of the ensemble, meaning we are a team, and in order for us to have a successful evening, a successful show, everybody needs to be successful. We need to work together. We need to collaborate. And so that's baked in. And so if you're going to be doing improv, you're going to need to learn how to collaborate. And really what that comes back to is what I said at the beginning, listening. Where does social and emotional intelligence come into it? Analytical men are very focused on results and data, as we said earlier, data driven. Still have no idea what's the proper pronunciation of that word, by the way, data or data. But the point is, very focused on facts and figures and goals. Leadership, particularly, if you're a CEO, you're very focused on, are we getting the result? Yes or no, black and white, did we accomplish this task? And in going about what could arguably be a very noble purpose of just making sure the numbers are good and making sure that we accomplish our objective, that the company is successful, there's a lot of space where perhaps social and emotional intelligence can be ignored. So what improv does is it teaches you how to analyze to a certain extent and register emotions from other people. And it also teaches you how to have a more effective back and forth between each other. If I need to accomplish an objective and we know this is where we're headed, the question is not now, okay, this person that I'm speaking to is clearly in my way because I'm trying to get over there. Go away. I need to figure this out. It's okay. Because we both know now and we've established that, going back to that idea of establishing X, Y, and Z in an improv scene, we've established and we already know, and it's clear between the two of us that this is what we need to be doing. We know that we need to get this done. We need to get this project done. We need to sell this client. We need to get this amount of progress done on a report before the end of the day, whatever it is, we need to get this done. Now the question is, how can we work with each other? How can we collaborate to get to a particular task? And in that way, you learn the social intelligence of how to work with someone else in order to accomplish a task, as opposed to, again, viewing other people as an obstacle. which unfortunately, in my experience teaching analytical men, tends to be a natural, I'd say natural, but it just tends to be a side effect of working in those types of fields. People are chaotic. People are anomalies. People don't follow, they're not a machine. And as a result of that, that can create problems. Until you learn that, you can work with other people in order to solve the problems that come up. It's how do we solve for the win? How do we get where we're going together?
In order to be great coach, one needs to, you have performed at so many notable places, the Comedy Store, the Jimmy Kimmel Comedy Club.
Yes, sir.
How do you handle moments when things go wrong, and how do you apply them in your business challenges?
I like it when things, I shouldn't say that. I always say that, and I'm always worried. You got to be careful with the words you say. I never want to encourage bad behavior from audiences who ever watch any of the media that I'm involved with. And I also don't want to just, in terms of karma, put it out there, so to speak. Having said that, I didn't realize that, like I said, I was teaching for a couple years prior to me doing stand up. And when I was teaching at my peak of private students, I ended up restructuring how I did it, how I teach. I do more group courses now than I used to. I used to do no group courses at all. I found a lot of joy in teaching many people at once. Having said that, back when I was purely running one-on-one sessions, what eventually happened, because I was new to starting my own business, I'm sure many of the entrepreneurs listening can relate, and you just end up screwing yourself over with your calendar schedule. You just don't sleep or you don't eat because you have so many meetings, right? There's just, you don't know, out of ignorance, you just are like, yeah, let's do it. New student, new client. Okay, we'll put him here. And then you eventually, it's, oh, I've been sitting at my desk for the last 11 hours teaching and I haven't been able to get up. So what happened is this, and I found this very funny. I ended up in a position where for about a year and a half, conservatively, I need to run the numbers on this to make sure I'm being accurate. It was at least 3 hours. Let's say between 3 to 4 hours. I need to run the numbers so I get it accurate. 3 hours is 100% correct. So I'll say 3 hours. I got into a position where for 3 hours a day, selectively, meaning I had multiple students throughout the day, and if I'm running exercises, it's the latter part of that session. You combine all that together for a grand total of maybe 3 hours. For 3 hours a day, for around 5 to 6 days a week, for about a year and a half, I was doing nothing but running improv exercises myself. Because when I teach, I'm going to be the second partner to my students, right? If I'm running improv exercise, if I'm having my students run improv exercises, I can have them run solo exercises as homework. But when they show up, there are a myriad of other exercises that I run. And as the coach, I can modulate how these exercises are ran in order to have effective results for my students. But the point is, not only are my students running the improv exercises, I'm running them with them. So I'm running, like I said, about 3 hours of improv exercises 5 to 6 days a week for about a year and a half. It's probably a lot more than that, honestly. And what I found was this: by the time I started to do stand up, nothing could really phase me in terms of things going wrong. Now, was I a brilliant comedian at the beginning and even now? No, I had a lot of work to do. I always want to continue working at my craft. I never want to get into the hubris of, oh, I'm the shit, I'm amazing, and oh, I'm so great at what I do. One thing that I was really good at was if material didn't land, I always have had a recovery line easily. And what's funny is that really gets the audience back on your side. If I make a joke that really rubs the audience the wrong way, or I sense that the room has died down, I just say something as simple as, and there are clips of me online doing this, by the way, I've uploaded them on my social media. Now that I've lost you guys, what do we want to do now? Like that. And the audience laughs at that because I'm acknowledging the truth of the moment. But that's something that I was really good at, even early on, was good recovery lines. And if something happened in the audience, someone spilled a drink, a glass shattered, or the microphone cut out, I never panic. I noticed that in a lot of my colleagues who do stand up and stuff. I'm not knocking them, by the way. I'm just saying I noticed that it can become an emotional moment if they can't get the mic becomes unplugged and they can't get the damn plug back in. And there's like everyone's looking at me. I'm not saying anything. There's definitely some that can be a really tense moment. But for me, I think it was just because I ran so much damn improv, it just didn't phase me. I could handle that because I had put myself through the ringer for a really long time. Now, I give you all that context to actually answer your question, which I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was how do you translate that into business? Is that right? How do you translate that into business? When it comes to running improv exercises, what you realize is it not only has to do with interpersonal communication, but it has to do with when just problems arise at work. What happens when you need to do the presentation and the HDMI cable is not working? You plug it into your computer and it has worked 9 out of 10 times before. But now, of course, when you need to do the podcast with Mark, all of a sudden the the speakers on your laptop don't function as they need to. Oh my God, what do we do? Which, if that sounds specific, it is because the reason I'm listening to headphones, or I'm using headphones right now, guys, is because my speakers didn't work. So what do? Do we get upset? No, you solve for the win. I have to be able to hear Mark. So what's the second best solution? How can I solve for this quickly? I'll just put in headphones. Not that big of a deal. And it took me, what, 20 seconds? I had to find my headphones. But after that, yeah, plugged it in and got up and running. That could have been a catastrophic thing. And if I had been wrapped up in making it work the exact way I wanted it to at the beginning of this call, we could have spent 10 minutes and I would have had to restart my computer, blah, 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 blah. Why do that when instead I could just spontaneously in the moment use the skills that I have built myself into muscle memory over years of running these exercises myself and just handle it, just handle the problem and not have to make a big deal about it for myself and get emotionally wound up or upset and stressed. So I'd say how the idea of spontaneous problem solving is just unbelievably useful. And improv teaches that. I think everybody, particularly entrepreneurs, screw working in an established field at a company, but entrepreneurs especially, we are solving problems left and right all day long. And so I think that's incredibly useful for entrepreneurs to learn.
If I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, oh my God, Parker is talking to me, I am the one who gets anxious when things don't go right. And the longer they're not working, the more anxious I get. What improv exercise? Is there something that they could do at home that could they practice with a family member or on their own to start to build that calm and confidence within them?
Absolutely. Mark, it's almost like we should run an improv exercise right now live. You up for it?
You should do it.
Awesome. So I'm going to grab my phone here real quick just to keep track of the time. So this is a very simple exercise that anybody can do at home. It's very simple. It's called word association. And you can run this as a solo exercise, but you can also run it as a partnered exercise like me and Mark are going to do it right now. And here's the rules. It's the most foundational exercise that I teach. The idea is just this. Your partner A says a word, and then you say a word that's related to that word, and you just go back and forth for a total of 2 minutes. The only rule is no repeating words. So for example, if I were to say free, Mark, you might say what? Then I might say family, and you might say, then I might say school, and you might say, and there is no rules in regards to what we're allowed to say or not say. Mark didn't say anything wrong. I didn't say anything wrong. He didn't say anything right. I didn't say anything right. I might, and this is where the analytical mind can come in of technically bus is not the closest thing to school. How about classroom? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The point is, you trust your partner to a certain extent. You go back and forth, and ideally, you just try to be as good of a listener as you can and really make sure that you hear clearly what the other person says. And then, as quick as you can, the first word that comes to mind, just associate freely with what they said. The only rule of don't do that is no repeats. Mark already said the word bus. I can't say bus 10 words from now. Does that make sense, Mark?
Sounds good to me.
All right, we'll run this for 2 minutes. Like I said, I got my phone stopwatch right here. So I will choose us the first word and then we will go back and forth. All right, race car, race,
Horse,
ride,
along,
long,
drive,
road trip,
gas station,
tank, diesel,
truck,
wheel,
arrow,
point,
point, finger,
hand,
salute,
forehead. What was that?
slap,
Slam?
slap your
Oh,
forehead,
slap. I gotcha. Palm,
reading,
fortune,
teller.
talk,
What was that?
talk,
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 walk, okay. Mouth,
tongue,
taste,
dentist,
pain,
ouch,
child,
playground,
string,
mind,
games,
monopoly.
ward.
Good. That's it. 2 minutes. When we survived, all fingers, all toes, everything's there. Couple interesting things that happened during that. Number one, guys, for anybody listening, if you're ever running this over Zoom, you're going to have that, by the way, where sometimes you need to repeat words just because of the way the microphone cuts in and out due to it doing like noise suppression and cancellation. So just as a heads up, that's completely normal that you might need to repeat a word every now and then, which is why when you're running it over Zoom, you always state your words clearly, like we both did our best to. When you're running it in person, that obviously doesn't generally happen unless you're running it with, as I have students from over 30 different countries. So a lot of times there are accents involved and stuff. So sometimes you have to handle that. The other thing is, yeah, do you get that sense, Mark, when all of a sudden you pause a little bit and you might not know what to say next?
I was like, point. I was like,
Yeah,
point what?
right.
I was like, snap out of it.
I'll never forget we ran an exercise at the Groundlings when I was there for the class that I took. We ran this exercise where the warm-up exercise, meaning it's not even the meat of the day. It's just the first thing we did. And the exercise was, it's an exercise called alphabet. It's another exercise anybody can run where you run through the alphabet and you say a word that starts with a letter. So, for example, you would say acrobat, banana, cry, dog. You go all the way through the alphabet, just generating random words starting with the first letter. But we did it to where we were going back and forth. It was something like someone would say a word and then I would say the next word in the alphabet. And then someone would say we were going back and forth. And it got to me on the letter E. And for the love of God, I could not come up with a word that began with the letter E. It was so hard. My brain froze. I couldn't figure out. I'll never forget that. I was like, and then I took a deep breath and I came up with it, and then the game continued. And that's the beauty of running this, as I say, in 2-minute rounds, which is why I regiment these like exercises, because who cares if you screwed up around 45 seconds or you could come up with something to say. We got another minute and 15 seconds to keep going. And what we find is, even if you lose the rhythm or you have to take a brief moment because the word might not come to the mind immediately, eventually you find that rhythm again. And then all of a sudden it's pretty easy. And then you might slip out of it again. And then you go back and it becomes relatively easy. The more a person were to run this type of exercise, the better they will get at it. And you'll find, and I'd recommend anybody listening to this, if they want, run this exercise, particularly if you have to interface with the public as part of your job. Maybe you're an entrepreneur and you got to do sales for the day. You got to do calls. You have to go and door knock or something. I have some students who sold solar, for example. Run these exercises, 2 rounds, 2 minutes, maybe 3 rounds of 2 minutes at the beginning of your day, and you'll already be more warmed up than you would have been by the time you start knocking on the door, and your day will go better, guaranteed. So I'd recommend running that. Like I said, 2 rounds of 2 minutes, and it does make a difference. You can run it as a solo exercise. You're just associating off of yourself at that point. You don't need another partner to run it with, but if you do have a partner to run it with, that is also very beneficial.
Parker, I've spoken to so many coaches over the years, so many sales coaches, so many communication coaches. And after a while, it all starts sounding the same. You
Yeah,
are a breath of fresh air. The
thanks, man.
tactics you bring, the techniques you bring, the background you have, personality you have of a teacher who's just not talking, but also doing it in the real world. It brings a level of authenticity and credibility to what you're doing. And it's just been an honor and a pleasure having you on the show. Any last words for our audience members?
Any last words? Say yes and more. Accept and engage more with your life. There are a myriad of opportunities that exist around you every day to make life more playful, more fun, and to solve problems spontaneously and achieve better results and better relationships because you did all of those things. So say yes and more to your life.
For being on the show. It was a pleasure having you.
And I don't know end it yet. I got to say to you, thank you so much for having me on. I'm very new to doing podcasts and talking about what I teach. And I've done a couple comedy podcasts talking about comedy and stuff like that. But this is one of the first ones I've ever done where I've really gone into what I teach. So thank you so much for providing me with that opportunity. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.